Good morning. I just flew in from DC, so I'm a little disoriented, even more than normal. Please forgive me. So today, I want to talk to you about the technology at the Washington Post. I'll talk about specific products that we have built to help with our journalism. But I'll also sprinkle in, here and there, a little bit of the philosophy that's driving the Washington Post, especially after Jeff has bought us about almost 4 years ago now. So with that, for the longest time at the Post and in many other brand name journalism houses, it's always been understood that you have to be excellent in journalism. There's no doubt about it. You can't get your stories wrong. You need to do the investigative stuff. It's hard work. But more and more, in the modern age, most of us now accept that that's not enough. You also have to be excellent in technology. Google has spoiled us with their speed. You see beautiful products from Apple and Samsung. You see the convenience of Amazon. And we consumers have actually gotten spoiled and just taken these things for granted, whereas in many cases, legacy media brands have fallen behind in the design and the products and the convenience of how they put their content out there for us to consume. So really, at the Post, we look at a lot of brands. Here are some that we think are excellent in journalism. And, we think that might be a little better. And we also look at a lot of the engineering companies, technology companies, and we think that might be a little better. And so, and we try to put this together, and this is really our aspiration, to be up there on both axes. That's what's driving the Washington Post today. And that is the philosophy that Jeff has brought into making us into a media and technology company. And just before we move on, in my personal opinion, you see a lot of media companies doing a lot of tech these days. You see a lot of tech companies doing a lot of news these days. Fake news comes to mind. I believe that it's easier for one of us who has a history of journalism to be really good in tech than for a tech company to do journalism well. And that gap exists today, and that's what we are going after at the Washington Post. And the products that I'll talk about will touch on some of the stuff we are trying to do to get us up there. That's the gist of my talk. I had a boss who once told me that, it's hard to tell a good story if the numbers aren't there. So let me quickly do some numbers. This is our growth in terms of uniques. We now hover a US audience only, adult audience at about 100 million uniques a month. So basically 1 in 3 Americans comes and visits us at least once a month. We've gotten some awards, a lot about innovation, big data, bots, etc. Recently, we got the best news website. The one who was second in that ranking was also based on our technology. So I was joking with their CTO who would win the prize. And now let's get to the gist of it. So I want to talk about the stuff on the right-hand side. The philosophy that we drive at the Post on the engineering and product and design teams is that we cannot get caught up in just getting data for data's sake. Engineers like me, we sometimes get caught up in how to store this data, how to mine this data, how to control costs, what's the most effective way to find nuggets in this data, but sometimes forget about working backwards from the consumer. And this is, again, a philosophy that Jeff has brought to the Washington Post. Oftentimes, when we do product discussions, we start by writing the PR announcement for that doc. What would it look like when we actually release the product? And work backwards from there. So on the right-hand side are the actual products that all the data that we gather and mine and store leads to. And we'll go through these products one by one. So the first one is the standard recommendation engine. We call it Clavis. Clavis in Latin means the key, so the key to unlock the data. Clavis sits on top of everything we publish at the Washington Post. So whether it is content that the advertising team produces for our advertisers, or whether it's content that the newsroom produces. And it sits on top of the publishing system, watches what goes by, and it automatically tags and classifies the content into about 8 nodes, typically. And these are not nodes like business, politics, style, etc. It's much deeper. It's stuff like green energy, urban renewal. It also does things like this is left-leaning, this is right-leaning. So under the covers, there is a machine that's trying to fundamentally understand what this content is. That's the gist of Clavis. And the applications of that understanding, the most basic one is a recommendation module. If you go to the Washington Post, whether you're on the home page or on our article pages, you'll typically see a recommendation module in there. And we started to measure when our algorithms were doing reasonably well. So the red line down there is basically if you just put a random set of recommendations. And it's human nature. If you even put random articles, but you say it's recommended for you, people will click on it. And that's why that red line isn't down there at 0. So the first step, of course, was Clavis had to beat that random generator. So we split our traffic, did that test. The next test was to take something that's out in the market and train that, put it on our system, split the traffic again, and see if we could beat it. And over time, we have beaten the market-leading candidate. Why? Because I think we know our data the best. The training that you can do when we know our users and our content is far superior than having a platform from outside that you then fiddle with. So that's basically Clavis on the content side. But where you can really make money, and this is what we do, is if you use it for brand content or native content. And what do I mean by that? So as I said, Clavis sits on top of what the newsroom writes. It also sits on top of what the sales team writes and creates. And what Clavis does is, because it's having an understanding of what the content is, you typically are able to put brand content, native content, within the articles that are similar. So you're here, you're on the post, you're reading about health or green energy or Alzheimer's disease or something of that effect. And then you get the native content that, say, the Cleveland Clinic has produced on how good they are for diseases like Alzheimer's, and that appears within the context of your editorial content. And this is the machine doing it. And then when you do something like that, then you see that users react well. So typically, you can see random averages. These are the click-throughs. And when you do it with Clavis, the lift is almost 10x. So our sales team calls this brand, they used to sell it as Brand Connect. Now they call it Brand Connect Intelligence. And you can charge a higher CPM to our customers for that. The other piece of technology I'll talk about, and this is another philosophy that Bezos has brought to the Post. We as humans tend to look at what's broken and how should we fix it. This is a common tendency of ours. He suggests that, of course, we should do that, but we also should look at what's working and double down on it. Often we forget to do that. And in response to that philosophy, some of us engineers got together, and this is what we built. We call it Virality. And what Virality does is that it is some automation that looks at our articles and tries to predict whether this is going to go viral or at least be popular. Okay, why do that? What's the point of that? When the newsroom gets that message that, hey, this might be viral, or we think this will be, or the machine thinks it's going to be popular, then they can double down on it. The homepage promotes it even more. The social teams push it out everywhere. The PR team will send it to their connections saying, we think this story is going to be big. You should be promoting it too. So that basically doubles down on the fact that we think we have a winner and makes it an even bigger winner. And if you look at what's basically going on, that's essentially the bot telling the newsroom through Slack that, hey, we think that this article is going to be bigger. But the engineering behind it is, you could argue to say, okay, what's the big deal? I mean, you look at the clicks, and if the clicks are coming, then you can predict that, yeah, this is going to be big. And if they're not coming, it's not going to be big. Let's get a little bit technical for a minute. In fuzzy algorithms like this, you typically are looking for the algorithm's precision and its recall. Yeah? Recall is, let's take an example. If a machine is trying to identify males and females in this audience, the recall of that algorithm is, if there are 50 females in this room, how many of them did it recall? Did it recall 5 or 10 or all 50? That's recall. And the precision of the algorithm would be, let's say it recalled 10 females and said, these are females. The precision would be, how many of them are actually female? Okay. And what you want is high precision and high recall, because you can be really good at precision if you only recall one. Then the algorithm is extremely conservative, and it's saying, I will absolutely get it right, but I'll only get one right, and not recall the other 49. So you want high precision, high recall. And what this graph is showing is that if you only use clicks as the predictor of virality or popularity, then, those are the red dots there, you may get high precision, but you will get low recall. You may get high recall, but you will get low precision. The band there within the two red lines is where the precision and recall are both high. So what do? You add other signals into the algorithm. Signals like, for example, who's the author? What is the sentiment? What time of day has it gone out? What's the social shares on it? You add these signals in, you tweak the algorithm, and then you start tightening the band. And that's the blue line. Those are the blue dots on the right. We are working on, now this is post-production. This is within 30 minutes of production. We are working on currently if we can do it prior to production. And if we can try to figure that out, then of course the next step would be suggestions to the creator of that content, what to do to make it popular. Sometimes perhaps you hold the story. Sometimes you collaborate with somebody else. Sometimes it could be the headline that you put together. And that, again, was virality, trying to double down on what we think might be popular. Another algorithm that we have, we call it Bandito. And this is based on this concept in math about, it's called a one-arm bandit algorithm. And why do you call it that? Because if you talk about going to a casino in Vegas, and you want to come up with an algorithm on how to maximize your earnings, then this is a strategy. It consists of two phases. One is experimentation. You try all the slot machines. And the second is exploitation. If there happens to be a flaw somewhere, you exploit that to win as much as possible. And so this is an optimization algorithm. And we use this for our content testing. So the newsroom has this tool, and they create multiple headlines, or they may choose an image and a headline. The video team might actually choose an animated GIF versus a thumbnail, and many combinations. But the trick is to create as many as possible, put it out in the wild, and let the machine decide which one wins. So it starts by giving equal traffic to all of them, and you can decide what the winning parameter is. Let's say you decide click-through is the parameter. You could also do scroll depth. You could do a subscription-based parameter, whether they actually convert or not on that article. But at the end of the day, the newsroom puts out as many variants as possible, and the machine slices and dices and gives more and more traffic to the one that's the winner. Yeah? And then the newsroom could, at some point, put in another variant into the mix, and the experimentation begins again. Yeah? So quickly, in this case, it's click-through. So you can see it's the same article, but different image, different headline, and the machine chose the second one based on how users were reacting to it. So okay, that's when the newsroom, humans, write the headlines. But could the machine itself do the headlines? So we've been playing around with that a bit. And this is a little bit dangerous territory, especially if we get something really wrong about someone in the White House. So we want to be careful. This is still in the lab, but I see a lot of promise in this technology. And if you couple this with the previous one, the headline testing, there is no reason why you couldn't try 40, 50, 100, 1,000 different variants of headlines and images. The system can produce it, and the system decides which one to give the winning candidate to. The load on the human is much less, and I think the gains are huge. And again, that goes back to, I said we would try and sprinkle a little bit of our thinking here. You know, when we talk as a senior team, when we first met with Jeff Bezos, I mean, you know, his advice to us was, look, I understand that the internet took away your business, okay, basically, the print business. And I also understand that in many ways, what the web did to print, mobile is doing to the web. Desktop pennies, mobile dimes to desktop pennies in terms of advertising. But you also have to consider the gifts that the internet brought to you. And the fundamental gift that we publishers have innately known about, but sort of ignored in some ways, is the gift of scale. That's the fundamental gift that we've gotten. And that scale is endless. You can have an endless variety of headlines, an endless variety of image, an endless variety of combinations, and you can have the machine converge to the one that does best by the metric you define, whether it's subscribers or hang time or click-through. This is possible. And that's what we are experimenting with Headliner. This goes one step further. What if the machine actually tried to write the story? And I know that this makes journalists a little bit nervous, so I want to caveat this. Yeah? I mean, at this point, at least, the technology is in its infancy. We are doing it mostly where there is a lot of rich data, whether it's elections or Olympics or crime statistics, real estate, earnings reports. There's a lot of hardcore structured data, and the machine attempts to write the story, update it, and push it out on as many platforms as you can. And so, I'll just read this out to you. This was a little bit while back. I think it was in December or November, but this was an article that came out in Wired. I don't know if you can see it. Let me read it. When Republican Steve King beat back Democratic challenger Kim Weaver in the race for Iowa's 4th congressional district seat in November, the Washington Post snapped into action, covering both the win and the wider electoral trend. Republicans retained control of the House and lost only a handful of seats from their commanding majority, the article read. A stunning reversal of fortune after many GOP leaders feared double-digit losses. The dispatch came with the clarity and verve of which the Post reporters are known, with one key difference. It was generated by Heliograph, a bot that made its debut on the Post website last year. Yeah. So this is a piece of technology that, again, allows us, by the way, we call it Heliograph. Why? It is GRAF as a paragraph, right? And helio, because it can be done at the speed of light. So once again, it's a story about scale. The machine can do much, much more quicker than a human can, in terms of the amount of content it produces, and also in terms of the platforms it can push it out on. It doesn't just have to be web. It'll put it on Twitter, it'll put it on Alexa, it'll put it on Reddit channels, wherever you want it to go. So it's scale again. Yeah? And also, another interesting data point is that if you look at large sites like ours, it is true that the big stories, the big original content that we have, often drives a lot of our traffic. But there's also a long tail, which, if you integrate that area under that curve, often is much more than what the big stories bring. So, you take these elections, or you take the Olympics. There might be a sport that not many people are interested in, being played by two small countries. That's not the United States playing against China or some big thing that everybody is covering, okay? But there'll still be 100, 200, 500 people who will want to read that story. Google picks it up, Bing picks it up, it's shared in social media. There is some amount of traffic you get. And if you now extend that to covering every single sport, updating it as soon as a goal is scored or something happens, and putting it out in as many channels as possible, that traffic is non-trivial, even though few people come to those articles. And so, what's next for Heliograph? Well, we are trying to do it with multiple verticals. The elections are coming. We want to cover every precinct in the United States, not just the major races. And the next step is, well, can we generate video too? And why is video important? Everyone talks about video, video, video. What's the big deal with video? Well, the big deal with video is that if you look at it from a business perspective, two things drive advertising. Yeah? One is the sell-through rate. How much can your sales team actually sell from the inventory of page views that you get? Is it 50%, 60%? If you're a smaller site, it could be close to 100%. But for a large site, those numbers hover 40%, 50%, 60%. That's the direct sale that they make. The rest is programmatic, yeah, from the ad revenue perspective. So one is the sell-through rate. That's one parameter. The second parameter is what CPM do you get? What's the charge per 1,000 that you're going to get? And that ranges. Mobile is lower often, desktop is higher, tablet may be somewhere in the middle, et cetera, et cetera. But CPM and sell-through. For video, at least at this point in time, CPMs are extremely high. $40, $50, $60 CPM. And sell-through rate is also very high. The sales team wants more and more video. So you put those two together, and from a business perspective, video is a very lucrative business for publishers to be in. Sell-through rates are high, and CPMs are high. So then what happens? The inventory that you have of video often is the blocking point here. We can't produce enough video. So we hire lots. The newsrooms are getting so big in terms of video that most of us rival television stations. At the Post, we have close to about 100 people working on video. But can machines help with that? I'm sure that, at least at this point in time, it can't make fantastic videos. But can we take a crack at it? So this is Helio Video. And what it does, the first thing you have to be able to do to produce this video is that you have to take Clavis that we talked about and make it understand the article at a deeper level, something closer to being able to write a summary of the article. So this is an article where this modified Clavis has gone in and is trying to pull out the key paragraphs that it thinks constitute the story. Once it does that, then it can pull out the tags from those key paragraphs and look in our repository to see what kind of imagery we might have or video clips we might have. And then it stitches it together, adds a soundtrack, and produces a video. So is it like an awesome video that a human takes? No. Is it more like a slideshow? Yes. But this is the beginning. Let's see where we can take it. So here's an example.
Hours after Tesla sued its former employee on charges he had stolen company secrets, and days after Chief Elon Musk had called him a saboteur, the Silicon Valley automaker made a startling claim. The company had received a call from a friend of the employee, Martin Tripp, saying he would be coming to Tesla's Gigafactory battery plant in Nevada to shoot the place up, according to a Tesla spokesman.
So that's an example. In this case, it decided not to put a soundtrack, but actually use Poly, which is a technology that Amazon produces, to actually read the paragraph for you. Now, the way we try to do technology at the Post, my direction to my teams is, look, whatever technology we build for the editorial side, we need to try and see how we can leverage it for the sales team. And if we are innovating on the sales side, let's see if we can bring it to the newsroom. So, in that sense, technology is, and there's a wall between the editorial side and sales side, as there always should be, so that the journalism is not, being done for commercial purposes. But engineering is Switzerland, and that's interesting. I say that a lot. It's the first time I've said it in Switzerland. So, we built this for the newsroom, and of course, you can use it on the brand studio side for ads. So that's a machine-generated ad for one of our clients. Okay, moving on. Another piece of technology is this thing called ModBot. And what does this do? If you look at modern sites like the Post, the Times, etc., we get a lot of engagement from people who are doing comments, who are putting comments on the site. But the quality of the comments is terrible. There's a lot of, you are an idiot. No, you are an idiot. That goes on a lot. And we spend a lot of money because we want to have quality comments with human moderators trying to, either accept or reject comments. And that costs money. So this is an attempt by us to try and produce an intelligent algorithm that tries to do two things. One is, it tries to go ahead and accept the comments that it should on the top side and cut off the comments that should be rejected on the bottom side. And here again, it's still early days, but these accuracy numbers are very, very high. So we are it's very promising at this point, and it's actually in production. The costs that we used to spend to do comment moderation, we have dropped it almost 10x with this, and there's a lot more we can do. So again, if you look at some of these algorithms, we talked about precision and recall. Another way of looking at how good, in this case, it's a binary classifier. It simply says it should be accepted or rejected. And one way of looking at that for fuzzy algorithms is the so-called confusion matrix, where on the top row, what it's basically saying is, hey, of the 3,796, n equals to almost 4,000, those that should be approved and were actually approved is 2,906. And then you need to look at the diagonal on the other side for the delete. Of those that should be deleted, 445 were, giving a total accuracy of about 0.9. One is perfect. So there is room to grow. It makes mistakes. And what it basically does is, for the remainder that it's not sure whether to approve or not, that's the part that now goes to the human to do. But since the volume is reduced, we pay the human much less, the moderator. Okay, now we come to why I'm really here. All this and more you can have if you buy our publishing system called Arc. Because what we've started doing for the last 3 years now is that whatever technology we've been building, either for sales or for newsroom, we have now started selling to other publishers. We call it Arc. Why do we call it Arc? Because it spans the arc of publishing. It goes all the way from story authoring. So we have our own, I think, superior editor that competes with things like Drupal and WordPress. We call it Ellipsis. We have our own video editing that competes with Kaltura and Uyala. We call it Goldfish. We have our own image editing called Anglerfish, etc. Story authoring. And then there's the planning piece. It says editing, it should say planning, where when you have a group of people producing content, our newsroom now is almost 800 people. There is a lot of back and forth in email and stuff like that. What you really need is a simplified workflow where senior editors can see everything that's being worked on. What's the video group doing? How many stories are we writing on Hurricane Florence? Who's working on what? And also look to see what the workflow is. Where are the bottlenecks? Is it getting stuck in copy editing? Is it getting stuck because the videos are coming in late? And then ultimately decide how much content should go out by when, a quota for it. And then look to see whether we are hitting those quotas or not. So we have a planning system called WebSched, and there are some advanced services that we talked about, 2 of which I talked about, Clavis and Bandito, but others like Headliner, Heliograph, etc. fit in that bucket. Then there's the delivery piece, which is, we put out to our website, of course, but how about Alexa, how about Apple News, how about Facebook Instant? There's so many other surfaces that a modern publisher has to put stuff out on. And then there's the monetization, whether you do it through subscription or ads. And Arc is now basically, we've got pretty much every advertising market in the US covered now. We've got the LA Times, Boston Globe, Chicago Tribune, Dallas Morning News, some large companies in Europe, El País in Spain, La Parisienne should be somewhere, Globe and Mail in Canada, etc. And so all the technology that we talked about, and I just want to wrap it up by saying, we look at Amazon closely, and in some ways at the Post, we are trying to, in a much smaller way, try and replicate the AWS model. I talk to the AWS people a lot, and there is a virtuous flywheel that goes on between Amazon and AWS. And that's what we are trying to do with Arc at the Washington Post. We want to push our journalism as far as it can go with the technology that we are building. But we also want to become, the technology group wants to become a significant source of revenue to fund our journalism instead of just advertising and subscription. We want to be the third leg in the stool of funding that. Well, that's my talk for today.